Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into the experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. Design, of course, is a critical part of product development. It's where the ideas in our heads start to take shape in the real world. I'm not a designer, but of course, being in product management for 15 years or so, I've had many situations where I've needed to express my vision for a product or a feature visually so that my engineering partners or my design partners could at least get a grasp of where my head was when it came to this idea. So like many people, I just sketched something on paper or a napkin if my brilliant ideas sparked a happy hour at a local pub. And then I shared it with my designers or engineers. Of course, it's iterated on many times before it's final. But I think that's probably a typical way that product designs start, right? They start with the quintessential idea on a napkin. Well, these days, there are still the ideas sketched on napkins, but technology is making it so that even these non-designers like myself can express our ideas in really effective mock-ups and prototypes. It's still important for the expertise of the design team to come in, but it's also important that more folks can illustrate ideas, if you will, right? So our conversation today is to discuss the democratization of design, how everyone in the ecosystem of product management can be a part of the critical function of design when it comes to product innovation. My guest today is Florian van Schreven, the co-founder and COO of Uizard, the design tool for everyone powered by AI. He and his team are on a mission to help organizations and enable individuals from various backgrounds to easily turn their ideas into testable apps and digital solutions. They believe that a democratization of design is one of the first steps needed to tighten this accessibility gap between every human and modern technology. Uizard is a really cool product, so I recommend you guys go see it. It's Uizard, by the way, Uizard. So, Florian, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I'm excited.
Thank you so much for the introduction, JJ Rory. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good conversation. Okay, so democratizing design. I use that term and I love that term. But what does that really mean to you and the Uizard team?
That's a great question. So indeed, we've heard a lot of democratizing different industries, but exactly like you said, what does it really mean? For us, democratizing an industry or democratizing design is really allowing anyone without the prior skills to be able to perform those specific tasks. For us, when we talk about design in general, we talk more specifically about product design. So the ability of visually creating prototypes, digital prototypes of applications or of websites. When we look at different industries, one of the industries that we like to look at in terms of democratization is definitely the photography industry. The reason we like to take that one as a good example is that we've seen over the last 2 decades around, since the birth of the iPhone and having the software and the hardware the technology able to automate parts of the difficult tasks in taking photography, has allowed now to make more or less anyone create really professional pictures just from their phone. And this has been achieved with the software integrated within the phones, doing all the heavy lifting around it so that someone, again, like I said before, without any prior knowledge or skills, can just jump into it and take professional photos. Another good example actually on democratization with design in general is the company Canva, for example. They've what we believe are on the mission to democratize graphic design in general, so creating banners, creating infographics, creating cards and letters. And they've now opened up this entire room to all these professionals, marketers and other ones who need to create these assets, but didn't have the prior knowledge to do so. So for us, the real democratization happens when all the heavy lifting is hidden away from the user and anyone can just jump in and start creating things.
Yeah, those are great examples, especially the photography, because even I can take great photographs now with my smartphone. That's really interesting. So you guys at Wizard have done a lot of research in this area, of course, product design. Who's doing design, how it's being done, etc. What can you share on that?
Definitely. So it's pretty interesting. So looking at product design or digital product design, so application and websites, looking in the history of it, it started with the birth of the internet. So that was around the late 90s somewhere. And it's completely changed in the last 25 years or so on the way we've been doing it. It all started with we have an idea. As long as we have the most performant developers and the best coders, we can just very simply create a really good website application from it. So it was just having an idea in your head, explaining this one to a skilled developer, and they would just create the logic from it. We rapidly identified that the design within applications in general is extremely important as well. So in the early 2000s, more and more importance have been put around design in general. But we've really seen the shift after 2010, I would say. We can see there, for example, that with some of the companies, the shift with the amount of designers to engineer ratio completely changed. We could see that, for example, at IBM, they used to have one designer for every 72 designers they had in-house, developers in-house. Sorry, I'm mixing up the terms. But that meant that you had one designer for every 72 developers. This was in 2012 at IBM. And in 2017, just 5 years later, they had one designer for every 8 developers. So you can see that this entire ratio completely shifted from the 2012s onwards. And that's because most of the companies, or nearly all the companies, have understood that at this point in this day and age, the experience of all the users within an application is extremely important. So what we've seen as well is that a lot more focus has been put in general on design. We have design thinking that has really taken a prime part in all the organization. We have the design sprints as well, which was created by Google initially, and then populated very much in 2016 to be taken over by a lot of the organization. And what we see with this is that more and more profiles and more different people within an organization now have a say and have a crucial role in the development and the ideation of a new digital product. So when we take a step back, the workflow, looking at it, when we talk to people outside of the industry, of outside of the work doing it, we see that everyone thinks it's a very linear process. You start with an idea, you lay down some wireframes, you go over to creating a prototype from it, you ask a UI designer to make it nicer, give it to a developer, he codes it or she codes it, and you have a perfect, great application that comes out of it. In reality, that's absolutely not how it happens. With this focus put on user experience and design in general, there's a lot of iteration happening. The reason there's so many iterations happening is that I always like to compare design, or at least ideation, coming up with new solutions, to the same as navigating a maze. You start at the entrance points of the maze, you're trying to find the exit, but you often don't know which is the right path to take until you've taken that specific path all the way to the end. In product design, it's about creating the prototype, having it there, then giving it to end users, having end users testing it, and then identifying if indeed this new solution brings more value or less value than the previous one. So all in all, you need to be able to iterate continuously. So it is extremely important to be able to prototype extremely fast, because this is very much the ideation process extremely early on. A lot of prototypes get created, a lot get tested, and only a handful will go forward to see the light of day. What we've seen as well with this workflow change a little bit is, as I was saying, more and more different profiles take part in this ideation phase. So, for example, if you look at a design sprint, so the 5 days process with identifying new opportunities, the people taking part of it is you have the chief of product, you have a product manager, you often have user researchers, sometimes some marketeers even, domain experts, and then, of course, you also have the UX designer. And the UX designer is there to help communicate all the ideas of everyone within that team visually. So in other words, it's being able to create the prototypes of all the knowledge that a product manager has or a user researcher has domain experts, people that also interact with end users. The UX designer themselves also have a lot of knowledge on this. And being able to then communicate all of this visually to test a prototype and move it further into the organization. What we realized when we started working on Uizard is that actually with this, it's only the UX designer currently that has the ability to create these prototypes in a fast manner. So simply during a design sprint and during the ideation phase, there's already so much miscommunication happening between these different profiles who orally or written try to describe the intent that they want, and then having a UX designer trying to understand that and translating it into a visual design. And that's where we see that being able to open up this word to everyone that is actually taking part in the ideation phase will just foster the communication and the innovation process between everyone. Because everyone speaks the same language, everyone can then brainstorm together forward onto visual design, and they can be aligned much early on. So less repetition work in our already workflow with a lot of iteration.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I often spend time kind of coaching product managers and engineers to collaborate from the very beginning, because there's the old adage of, and I'm old enough to remember when this actually happened, even in software design and development, where product requirements were written in a document and then thrown over the proverbial wall to engineering, and engineering would come back to product in 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months and say, here's your product, right? And so,
exactly.
there's still a lot of coaching to be done on true collaboration. And so the same thing is what you're saying in kind of the front end, right, of the design. And so I think that's really interesting in that translation of the team to UX designer. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for this democratization, if you will, right? I think that's a really good point.
Exactly.
Are there other areas or other kind of aspects that you've seen in your experience of why now is a really good time that, organizations should be democratizing that design into more functions and more roles?
Definitely. So one of the things is that digital project, everyone is working on one right now. So the competition is extremely fierce. But the amount of new websites being uploaded to the internet on a daily basis is still more than 14,000. And there's still more than 2,000 apps being uploaded as well on a daily basis to the App Store. So everyone is working on building better product. We are in a digitalized world where everything has shifted to this. And there's still a lot of new opportunities of helping and creating value here. So what we've seen is that even companies that had nothing to do with the digital sphere have had the need to digitalize. Think of a restaurant, especially now during the pandemic that we've had, being able to take orders online and being able to serve their clients in a different manner. So because of all of this, we see that the entire industry of creating apps and websites is only increasing and growing and growing. And this also means that the frustration and the miscommunication and everything that we've talked about previously or before is just increasing and increasing as more people are coming into the sphere. In addition to that, we see that a lot of new profiles coming into it who do not have the prior experience of a designer, but it's also not something that they're looking to become in the future. I'm talking, for example, with what I said, the non-digital companies that need to digitalize themselves right now. An owner of a local store that needs to create a website for it to be found easier. That person is not looking to become a designer in the future or something like that. But that person still wants to be able to create the idea, communicate the thoughts that they have of how their website should look like, in an easy manner, to be able to then create it and then have a developer create it afterwards. So this is one of the reasons why I think it's extremely important to do it now. And the other one is also with all these new processes in place. So for example, the design sprint, this is only picking up more and more people are doing it. In 2016, the book came out, but it's again a good example of non-experienced people entering the design sphere and needing to communicate their ideas visually. One of the other reasons I think it's important as well to be to have these people interact as early on as possible is because the prototypes often make or break the end product. As we were discussing earlier on, being able to communicate all the ideas on being on the same page extremely early on also means that the creation of the product will go smoother, will cost less. And this is also very important for a lot of smaller companies that don't have the budgets. So being able to do that in-house, have the people that have the knowledge, create this visually, and then shortcut some of the aspects to be able to get to a more performant final product faster is also extremely important to them without involving third parties helping them.
Yeah, I like that. And I really like the idea of the increase of collaboration and the improvement of the translation, if you will, from product and engineer, if you layperson design to actual designers. But that brings me to my next question. So there may be some UX folks and some actual designers who are experts at this out there listening. So how can product managers specifically become quote unquote designers in this way without usurping the formal design process, or more importantly, maybe missing some of the expertise of the design team?
Absolutely. So I think it's very important for this one to clearly look at the difference also between a UI designer and a UX designer. A UI designer often responsible for creating the graphical interface, really making everything look extremely nice. This has a very creative aspect to it as well. The people designing this have a very different type of skill sets than product managers. And they also work in much more complex toolings. So toolings that allow you to play around with vectors, customize everything to the pixel level, because that's what is important, the pixel perfect final design. So the way I see it is that a product manager and a UI designers will not overlap in terms of responsibilities and in terms of tasks they do. The UI designer with a tool, for example, like Uizard that democratizes design, the UI designer would then be able to beforehand set up the styling that the product managers and that UX designers will use. So they can beforehand dictate the fonts, the buttons, how they will look, the different colors and all of this. So that the non-designers or product manager or UX designers are then creating prototypes in a fast manner, reuse the assets created by the UI designers and all the styling created by them to create the prototypes. Then there's the question between the product manager and the UX designer. And that's a question that even right now, before having tools that democratizes design, is a question that a lot of people are asking themselves with what is the clear differentiation between the two tasks. And what we see, at least from asking a lot around, is that while the UX designer is really focused on assessing the experience of the user, finding solutions and designing it. And then the product manager facilitates the cooperation between everyone within the team, tries to translate the problems, the solution or the everything identified from the users into actionable tasks, and they support the UX designer continuously. So looking at how they both work next to each other right now, a UX designer and a product manager support each other continuously. One is very responsible for the actual design, findings, and the experience of the users within the application, whereas the product manager is also helping with the cooperation between everyone and helping creating actionable tasks and actually the execution of creating these prototypes. We then think it's extremely important that product managers and UX designers can both brainstorm and communicate and collaborate visually, speaking the same language. In this case, the language is visual communication, so creating apps and websites, creating prototypes. And that's the language that right now is being spoken by the UX designer, but not by the product manager. So that's already where some of the miscommunication will happen. What we think is, and as well, having talked to a lot of teams, we see that a lot of small companies sometimes don't have both roles. They have or product managers that takes care of the UX design role, or UX designer that also knows all the business goals and everything that comes into play and plays the role of a product manager. The larger corporations that work with both of them, the ones that work really well together are the ones that have really defined responsibilities between the two. So they don't overlap on everything. Then the product manager is really responsible for inputting all the business what's called business aspects from their own company within the product. And the UX designer is much more focused on the actual experience of the user and the designing of it. By laying down really clear responsibilities beforehand, then you have less overlap and less frustration of one profile taking over part of the other one. And then the area where they need to brainstorm together is very clear as well. So that's more or less what we've seen work the best. But what we think is the most important is that indeed the UX designer and the product managers can speak the same language again and be able to communicate visually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What advice would you give to product managers who may want to use early design to help with problem solving and that process?
So my biggest advice is, without a doubt, do it. Execution again. Product managers are really good at it. So what I like to say is that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So it's really being able to communicate it visually just helps everything much faster within the entire workflow. But how do you actually start doing this if it's your first time getting around it? My advice here would be, first find yourself a tool that you're comfortable with. There's different prototyping tools out there, and having something that doesn't slow down your ideation process or your creative process because you know you can handle it extremely easily is the first step of it. After that is similar to the current workflow, understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and then really trying to build key aspects of that problem you're trying to solve. Another thing that we see as well with product managers and smaller companies is that they try to build their first prototype and try to build the entire program in one go, the entire app or the entire website. My strongest advice here is start with specific flows, especially if it's your first time creating a prototype. Focus on the login flow with the onboarding that comes afterwards, and don't think of the entire website and application that comes afterwards. Attack different small flows and optimize them little by little. And then before you know it, you'll have a full prototype of the entire application. Another advice that I can give as well is that if you're a product manager and you're building your first prototype, don't try to reinvent the wheel right away. And what I mean with that is that we have a lot of very skilled designers that have created templates, that have created inspiration and everything of how some pages perform better than others. Use them. So start building with templates, start building with inspiration that you can find from other people. There's no need reinventing the wheel right away. The last advice that I can also give is the level of fidelity in which you prototype. So the level of fidelity is how final the application or the website looks like. You can create very high fidelity prototypes in tools like Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD, or Framer even, which will take much longer to build. Or you can create much lower fidelity without any imagery or anything in tools like Balsamiq, for example. Working on low fidelity, if it's your first time building a prototype, can also bring a lot of advantages because you're not looking at the styling, you're not looking at how colors look around, you're not looking at any of this, and you're purely focusing on the user flow you're creating within your app or website. By starting with that, you can then have the base laid down and then start working on increasing the fidelity of this prototype to then test it with end users. So all in all, I would say definitely do it. Start using early design as fast as early as possible. It will help with a lot of miscommunication. And then start step by step. Use templates to make your life easier. Start working in a lower fidelity realm to start with. And then build and test as much as possible.
That's great. And I have to say that a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. That may be my favorite thing ever. I'm definitely going to use that. I'll give you credit, but I'm going to use that. I love that. That's awesome. I may even put it on a t-shirt. That's awesome. Okay. So Florian, any last words of wisdom?
I would say, so one of the things that we've heard a lot working on this project is linking a little bit back to the question you asked before, which is, are we replacing designers? Are we replacing designers' jobs? And I just want to finalize on this one that, as I explained before, no, absolutely not. The way we see it is that we live in a world where more and more innovation is coming on a daily basis. more and more people interact within this industry. And we strongly think that being able to open up this design word to these non-designers will only foster the collaboration between everyone. So it will be a true gain to the designers themselves. Less repetitive work, less redoing work because of miscommunication, and more brainstorming with the other people that have information about other pieces of the puzzles which you don't have.
This has been a great discussion. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, and not just the 1,000 meetings saying, but really important stuff. I think design is just such an important part of product management, and while it's becoming more and more, a part of what we do, I do think there are some ways that we all within the product management ecosystem can start to use the idea of design and the function of design differently. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been a great discussion, Florian. Thank you so much for joining me, sharing your experiences, your research, and your wisdom.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was really interesting indeed to speak more and to be able to speak openly about what we think the democratization of design means to us. Thank you very much.
Great. You bet. Thank you again. And thank you all for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.